interesting actually for both you, Justin, and Casper, watching and listening to the esports story, and of course, Casper, you can draw on other sports as well. Is there anything that stands out where you think, I mean, gosh, I wish we were starting from scratch? I mean, what are the elements that you see out there that perhaps you could see as takeaways?
Yeah, I think innovation in broadcast is something Casper talked about. I think it's something that our sport needs to push forward on. I think e-gaming in particular, the ways you can consume it, whether it's on Twitch or other streaming channels, is something where we need to explore more. And obviously, we talked about what we're doing at Breeders' Cup, putting our live content on social platforms. But I think we really need to learn from them on how to engage around that content and create a digital platform that can really support and entertain people around our live racing.
I think it's interesting also that there's a very natural fit between those engaged in esports and people who are engaged in social media, because they're the same people. Casper, if I look at, say, football as an example, and you've drawn on that, and you meant that you were in Chelsea recently, I remember Eden Hazard, great Chelsea midfielder, saying, well, I don't see the point in posting. I mean, what I do in training is boring. It doesn't really, it's not going to interest anyone. I don't really want to do it. This is a completely different creature up the other end of the room.
Yeah, it is. It is. But again, I think it's being always on, and you ask what we can learn from esports. The engagement is certainly something to be jealous about. The younger audience, there's something we all want to convert. We all want to talk to that audience. Their sort of attention span is absolutely limited, and you get to serve them day in, day out. Sometimes parents have to drag them away from their consoles. So that's something we can learn from, certainly.
But do you think footballers, I mean, Eden Hazard already, we're talking best part of 10 years ago, I suppose. Do you think footballers generally today are actually more on the style of an esports practitioner than perhaps an old-fashioned footballer? That buying into the story is important to them.
No, absolutely. And a lot of footballers are also into esports. They are gamers themselves. We have to take into account these are guys with at least the best ones they have when they're a professional footballer. You do have a lot of time available, and there's only limited things you can do. And one of them is obviously gaming, and they certainly take advantage of that. So what we have done in my previous role, we have done a link between people in the gaming industry, but also to footballers. And they speak the same language. They understand each other, and that's quite interesting to see.
Football's one good example. Rowan, perhaps another in terms of esports. You can be a huge fan of the elite at the top. You can be a huge fan of the elite at the top. You can also take part day to day with your friends in a community, whatever it is. Racing doesn't really fit into that mold in the same way. So what is the challenge in terms of creating that sort of synergy between participant and fan?
There are a lot of ways that we, at least in the esports space, make sure we tackle. So a lot of our audience, because of the sort of younger demographics, I think the Kingdom has 70% of our population are under the age of 35. 68% of them associate or consider themselves gamers. So how do we make sure that they are engaged all year round, especially with the competitions that we have? The younger generation at schools, at the university, with very short attention span. So we try to make sure that we have very personalized sort of experience. So user data, voting in polls, anything that can make them feel like they are actually playing a video game. Because as a fan, you know, you attend these events and you expect to participate, but you can't just watch. So having these personalized touch, sort of the control mechanism with the fans will help us tremendously by creating these stories and engaging with them, sharing their experiences, creating these storyboards across the year to help us really capture that market across different age categories, but also engaging the parents who are probably having a certain stigma as well, you know?
Yeah.
So how can we make sure that they have this relevance of the national strategy, you know? It being a career, whether you are the player or any adjacent relevant profession. You can be a referee, you can be a commentator. You can be a coach. You can be a financier. You can be a CEO. You can be anything. So it really is a phenomenon, I guess, but hopefully it stays for the long run.
They can all play that role. You said, Casper, in your presentation, you talked about the importance of interactivity and participation. Is that fan participation, did you mean? Is it involving the fan more directly in the sport, or is that about participation of the actors within the sport?
I suppose it depends what sport you're talking about. If you're talking esports, it's a participate and you want to see the big star. The game with football, right? Football is the most played sport in the world, so you got the participation and people have the natural interest. But I think in horse racing, participation is as much as coming and engage, coming on for race day, but also for race meeting, but also engage on a non-race day. So that is participating, and it's been mentioned a couple of times that the fight for time, the one thing we all have, doesn't matter who you are, we only have 24 hours a day. And we need to be relevant. Why would you spend your time, very, very valuable, very precious time with us? And we need to make the effort in order to do that. And how do we make the effort? There's been a lot about storytelling, but it's not only that. It's creating better storytelling. It's investing in the facilities in order to create that storytelling and have access to the main characters in the stories, anything from jockeys, from horses to trainers, but also behind the scenes. And that is understanding really what triggers the younger audience in order to participate.
Right, important point. Just to remind you, if you've got questions as well, please do use the app, get the questions in as well so we can bring them to our panel. But Justin, that's quite an interesting sort of parallel. You showed the Breeders' Cup Challenge, hugely successful, but there's an investment you've got from already committed fans, and you're trying to create an investment from new fans. And how do you maintain that balance? Because it seems to me that to bring in the new, you've got to offer something slightly different. To hold on to the old, that's different. So how do you keep them together? How do you make that meld as a success story?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the platforms and using social media as sort of our top of the funnel discovery awareness channel. 10 years ago, the only way you could communicate with your fans was through broadcast or how the media was covering you. Now we can kind of create our own stories. We can create those direct relationships with our fans, and we can learn from the content that we put out there. What are these fans interested in? How long are they watching these videos? Looking at all the different analytics to understand what different segments of our fan base want, and you have to kind of cater to all of them. But the newer fan might not engage or participate in the sport like the older fan. We know our older fans, like Casper pointed out too, they're the drive a lot of the wagering, and the newer fan is more in it for some of the storylines. They're in it for the experience of going to the racetrack, for some of the other elements around it. So I think it's really making sure you have a solid content plan and you're speaking to your different audiences appropriately.
You talked a lot about Forever Young. You can measure the success of Forever Young as whatever you want to call it, a fan engagement or a marketing tool, partly by pounds and pence, by dollar signs in some respects in terms of how much they're bringing in. When you put up those figures of millions of followers, of responses on digital, what is that actually telling you? What can you measure from that? Or have you got a sort of more granular appreciation as to what those numbers actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have more granular information. I mean, what I shared is sort of the top level impressions, engagements, but as I was mentioning it with social, you can...
They're such big numbers, it's difficult to know what to make of them. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can break it down by what content series we produced, how long were people watching that piece of content, what horses are they interested in. Sometimes it's not the obvious horse that people care about it, and you can find all that out just through analytics across social media, which really span the whole marketing funnel, from top of the funnel on engagement, on awareness and generating interest and discoverability, to the middle funnel of engagement and how they're interacting with our content, and even down to action. Are we driving them down the funnel to click and come to our website to learn more about our contenders, about our event, and even to tune in and to wager.
Can I ask you then, Casper? So Justin's top line is it's all about the horse. you've come into the sport, you're having a look at it as probably slightly wide-eyed still in terms of taking it all in. But do you think that is the correct line? Is that what younger fans focus on more than anything else? Or is it about the gamification of a race? What do you think?
I think we need to look at, we are talking to different audience, right? So we're working very much on segmentation at Hong Kong Jockey Club, and we need to speak different to different segments. So some of our customers who's been there for a very long time, coming every Sunday, they have a certain way of how their Sunday unfolds, and they're sitting with the newspaper and do their wagering. You don't have to tell them anything. They know it probably better than we do, because at least they believe they do. But the younger audience wants to be told to in a different, and again, going back to attention span, can you have a build-up to a race, and can you explain to someone who doesn't know anything in 40 seconds or 1 minute, this is what you need to know, without taking responsibility of pushing people into wagering, because we are a responsible business. But this is what you need to know in order to enjoy the next race. Can you do that in a very easy way where you can consume it? Because, and I'm talking as a newbie, right, it's quite an intimidating sport to come into. There's a lot of things you need to learn. There's a lot of things you need to be aware of. It's not like watching a football game and everyone can basically talk about it. As long as you understand the offside rules, you're not going to make a fool out of yourself. But what I'm trying to say is that if you can sort of make it a little bit more user-friendly, I think that will have an impact. But I do think the experience is there, the atmosphere is there, and it's something to build on. It's phenomenal.
How do you do that? I'm going to ask you, how do you do that? Because earlier, both Winfried and Felicity said, look, actually, it is a really simple sport. Which horse gets there first? That's it. That's the number one rule of the game. So what is the intimidation factor that you see that perhaps puts people off?
It's understanding which is a favorite horse and why is it, right? What do you need to look after? And I think you just need to explain it. We are very lucky. We use technology to sort of train people. We have people on site who are very fluent and they understand the sport, and they can explain to you if you want to put a bet on, and they're very professional. But they can't cover the whole ground. So how do you use technology? I'm thinking more like social media in order just to explain it. In what angle do you take, right? So that's one part of it, and then the other part is the entertainment bit. How do you make sure that people want to come there every Sunday, every Wednesday? I think we nail it on the Wednesday. I remember coming to Happy Wednesday probably 10, 15 years ago for the first time, and I was captivated. At that time, I was working for Manchester United, and I went back and told the team, this is how you do fan interaction. So we took certain elements at Manchester United, at Old Trafford, in terms of how can we get people so involved in that regard. But I think it's keep delivering that and keep being relevant, but also let not people just walk out and not come back. There has to be a reason to come back, right? And you've got to be that place. And we're very privileged with our location in Hong Kong. It's Wednesday night and so on. So and we are building on that.
It's always encouraging to hear that racing is providing lessons for other big sports, a club like Manchester United. That's interesting. I would say, Rohan, that actually esports is also intimidating to someone like me, to someone who's over the hill too early in life. So what do you do to make it a more warm and cuddly environment? I mean, that encourages people in, or do you just not have to bother?
So again, I want to talk about KPIs and numbers, which can help us really see how we warm up the bigger audience, not just the younger population, but also the parents, the teachers, and whatnot. So a lot of entities for events, they have KPIs that is, okay, a very good successful event, offline attendees. In esports, funny enough, we have of technical difficulties not having the actual competition stop, but one of the most important KPIs is total viewership online. Peak viewership online, meaning how many people watched altogether what we view to our audience. And again, I don't want to talk about the Esports World Cup because that's the foundation's sort of bread and butter. But in their event, which happens 6 weeks only in the summer, peak viewership, meaning people watching at the same time, not counting in China, more than 600 million, imagine. Crazy numbers. I mean, I actually gathered numbers after seeing Justin's presentation. As a federation, with everything we do, just with the local community, I mean, some international follower bases, our PR was 1.3 billion just in 2025. Media value, 74 million US dollars. Engagement, 927 million. That's just in 2025. And that's just what we do for the local community. Numbers are important, but again, storytelling and really investing in content creation as an important stakeholder and a partner is absolutely fundamental in everything we do. Storytelling, so a creator can tell a story that can be relevant to a parent, to a player, to someone who wants to be a coach, maybe after, retiring at the age of 26 years old, So that storyboard can be extracted by a short period of time, but then can be used across year long. So this is what we try to do at the Federation. Content creation, really important stakeholder, decentralizing storyline, really investing heavily in them, making sure that it's not just, our partnership is not just during the event, but all year round, making sure that they are involved as an ecosystem partner, not just for a one-off.
But it's interesting what you say about who can be the participants to tell that story. So it could be a coach, it could be a parent. It doesn't just have to be the star player. I mean, it's a much broader firmament than that, and you've got to sort of encourage them all to play their role in
Absolutely.
that.
Actually, when we host tournaments and we have young university or even schools, like middle school participation, winning first, second place, when their family really hugs them at the end, we make sure that we capture the story, because this can inspire many, many younger generations as well. And that's why we have huge number in our university and school leagues. 1.2 in just 1 year, that's a phenomenal number.
Yeah. I slightly preempted a question that's come in actually, Justin. This is from Bobby Jackson, who said, do you think fans engage more with the horses or the humans, whether they're jockeys or trainers? Do you have a view on that, or is it, I mean, clearly they all have their role, but you put the horse first?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the horse. If we don't have the horse, we don't have the connections, the jockey. We don't have everyone behind it to tell the story. But no, I do think it's important to do both. Yeah, it starts with the horse, but there's many more people and stories around the horse. So that's something that's important. And honestly, the stories we tell and how we tell them to which audiences, they vary by platform. So the content we'll put out on TikTok is greatly different than what we put out on X, and it's different than we put out on Instagram. So I think it is important. There's been efforts in the United States with the Netflix Race to the Crown, which is a great example of storytelling and trying to bring fans at home into the world of ownership and to the trainers and the jockeys. And it had great success, and I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to what goes on in the sport and how much everything still revolves around the horse, how much these people care about our equine athletes, but also how interesting they are and how much they love the sport.
Okay, thank you for that. Here's a question for you, Casper. I can feel the frustration coming out of this question, but it's from Gary Crisp, who says, how do you bring the F1 experience to horse racing? Given behind the scenes fan engagement for horse racing is far more complex, probably more difficult, how do you do that? And we often get fantastic examples thrown at us about, look what they're doing, look what they're doing. They can look very difficult to apply.
That's a very good question, and I don't have the blueprint for that right now, but it's an example of how we can look to, and I'm sure under Bernie Ecclestone, there was the same objections to go behind the scenes. So first, everyone should play along and making sure, and you don't start, I recall the first season of Drive to Survive was not as good as the last ones, and you didn't have Mercedes or Ferrari in the first two seasons, right? So you're building it and you're learning from your experience. You're making sure that you have the right people who are experienced in that field. So someone like Box to Box are very good at developing this content. They also done it with Tour de France, obviously did Drive to Survive. So from that perspective, they will look out and find the stories. And with right storytelling, we might not think that's an interesting story, but when people put put some craft behind it, a small story can become a big story, right? And that we have to look for the small things. And that we are creating so much content every day. There's so much stories, which we are, when we work in our sport, we might not considering it, but we need to see it from a different perspective. We need to see it from the consumer end. And the consumer, probably don't know. What do they want to learn? What do they want to hear about? What works, what doesn't work, right? So, and there are plenty of examples out there.
We've got a question for you here as well, Ron, which is connected to the vision of Saudi Vision 2030. And it says that you are playing, the Esports Federation, playing a central role in delivering that Vision 2030 by helping to build a sustainable esports ecosystem. You're developing talent, empowering creators, connecting Saudi communities to a global community as well. So how intentional has that been? I mean, obviously, Vision 2030 is a major strategy piece. Is this a strategic part of that piece, or is that how it sort of evolved?
Absolutely intentional. Everything that this sector strategy is doing is really making sure that all of the stakeholders don't reinvent the wheel. There is specific timeline and assignment for initiatives to every stakeholder that can sort of take the lead on certain specific item and can report back to the leadership. Everything is intentional. The Federation has very specific roles and specific mandates. Savvy Games Group, a PIF company, has a specific role and mandate. The Esports World Cup Foundation has a specific, the authority that will be launched hopefully very soon has a specific, everyone has a role to play, but we're all playing it together, which is the best part.
Well, and it's working. Justin, this session was about global broadcasting and viewership. We haven't talked a lot about broadcast, actually. How integral is that for you now on the international stage? I mean, obviously domestically as well, but all we hear time and again, and probably over the 20 years I've been involved here, we've heard that linear TV is on its way out. Hasn't quite gone yet, clearly, but where is that fitting now in this world of social media and other channels and outlets?
Yeah, I mean, certainly linear TV certain sports continue to grow, particularly in the US, and certain sports are challenged on linear. And I think that was one of our key strategies in terms of carving our rights out of our deal so that we can now put our product on social platforms. I do think we'll see a fundamental shift. We've seen the NFL, for example, put a week one game on free YouTube last year. So I think we're going to see a lot more sports properties shifting to that model. I don't think it's clear exactly how that will materialize and how that will be monetized, but it's certainly the direction everyone's heading.
Because broadcasters will take the best. That's the way it's going, isn't it? We want the best, we don't want it all. And I guess for the Breeders' Cup Challenge, that's possibly quite a good thing. For the broader landscape for racing, that must be a worry.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think distribution is key. Getting the content, the live content in front of our fans is first and foremost. How we do that, it might differ per region, it might differ per racing entity, but the goal is, I think, the broadest distribution possible.
Okay, I'm going to just give us we've got a few sort of challenging questions coming thick and fast, so let's have a nice positive. What is it about racing that makes you believe that it can, if you like, cross the divide? We've seen the demographic, the age range, which is not a great sign. Golf is probably worse, but I'm not sure there are too many other sports that is. What encourages you to believe that actually the step is there to be taken?
To me, it goes back to the product. I think we have an amazing product. I think our challenge is to get people to the track, to experience everything around horse racing. The equine athletes are amazing. The experience that we package around that is amazing. And it's just, for us, it's getting people out to experience it. And once we get them there, we know they're going to come back.
Casper?
But I think the fact that we are addressing it, we're looking at it, we're discussing it, and we are acknowledging that we have a challenge ahead of us and we want to conquer that challenge, I think that's the strongest starting point.
You're here to talk about esports, which you've done admirably. Thank you, Ron. But when you look at this racing world, what excites you? What makes you think that some of what you are doing and you have developed and learned in a very short space of time could be applied here?
I want you to imagine in the world of esports, content creation can be really, really touching to the fan base. Imagine Cristiano Ronaldo, speaking of football, walks into the stadium and then says happy birthday on the field to someone. This is what esports is doing. You are really touching the soul and the heart of your follower base. Every single superstar we have really engages with the fan. So maybe this is something that we can see, hopefully, in the future for racing.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Positive notes, great opportunities there, great challenges as well. Once again, to Justin, Casper, Rowan, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Thank you very much.